Monday in relationship to the overtime, ban of overtime at the docks. Understanding that the division wanted to have an emergency meeting last week, Monday at 12 noon, which they did. But certainly, I think that it's allow me to clarify exactly what happened with the overtime ban that was initially due to take place on the 21st of February. And on the 27th of February, last week, Monday, it was lifted. Just so the general public is clear, because certainly I think that the internal workings of the union is the internal workings of the BIU. But there was a meeting held during the employer's time, means during working hours, and that meeting was approved by management. It was held with the organizer, Brother Arnold Smith, along with members of the Poor-Rex division. Out of the 35 members, they were all invited to the meeting. Roughly about 19 members attended the meeting. The vote that came out was the suspension of overtime, and that vote was made by a clear majority. They gave the reasons why they were suspending the overtime, and certainly, whilst I do appreciate that, the union doesn't rely on any employer to make our case for us. We certainly would like to think that if information is going to be given to the public, the information that's given to the public should be clear, crystal clear. And I think the reason for that is to make sure there is no misunderstanding about why an overtime ban has been implemented and for what reason. And the reason why I'm saying for what reason, because it's important that once our members, particularly ones who didn't attend the first meeting, decided that they can't support an overtime ban. This was the workers who didn't attend the meeting. So we had another meeting. This is the democratic process of the union. We had another meeting, and the majority of workers, by a smaller majority, agreed to go back to working overtime. That's fine. I think the issue that the union has with this process is it certainly looks like basically from the World Gazette article, and this is the World Gazette article on the 24th of February. It clearly states the action centered around a dispute with the Marine Industry Union involving a person who was disciplined 3 years ago. Let me just stop here for a minute and declare my interest. That individual was my son. Just so everybody's clear. Understanding that he has a legal representative representing him over this matter. So the BIU is not representing him. The BIU may be called as a witness, but he has a lawyer representing him on this matter. And it's kind of interesting because in that same article, Mr. Jones told the World Gazette, the BIU made a demand that we could not agree to. They wanted us to reinstate an employee. Let me just tell you, and I'll give you a copy of the email that was sent to Mr. Jones as to the reason why the overtime was being put in place. The overtime ban was being put in place. Because certainly, I don't want, when we look at the demand that the union was making to have an employee reinstated, and the reason why this is important because on March the 4th, Saturday going, again, we see it, and this was Saturday. According to Mr. Jones, the Bermuda Industry Union called for a sacked employee to be reinstated as a demand that management could not agree to. At no point in time did we demand that the employee be reinstated. We never demanded that. So much so that we sent 2 letters, I'll give you a copy of them too, 2 letters to two members of the Polaris board, clearly asking, we'd like to have a discussion with the Polaris board on these 3 points. A discussion, not a demand. Discussion number 1, point number 1, reinstatement of the employee. Number 2, what is the cap on the legal cost? And number 3, SSL should discontinue the legal case, allow the matter to proceed to a tribunal without delay. Once again, we ask for discussion. No demand, we're demanding this, we're demanding that, we're demanding the other. Those were these options. Polaris board wrote back, that was on the 18th of January. Polaris board wrote back on the 6th of February. We're not dealing with this matter. You have to deal with the CEO, Mr. Jones. So it's important for us to understand that when you say the BIU made a demand and it was about the employee, this is the email that was given to Mr. Jones from the president of the division. As a result of a meeting with the Poor Workers Division held on February 8th, 2020, we, the union, have come to an agreement that we are given notice that in 5 days from February 21st, 2023, we will be suspending overtime as agreed in our collective bargaining agreement, Article 24, Section 1D. We are hopeful we can resolve this matter between the minister and stevedoring services as soon as possible. The matter between the minister and stevedoring services as soon as possible. And the matter that asking to be resolved because the employer and the World Gazette will be aware of this because they was in the court. They were in the court last year, June. This article is dated June 8th, 2022. The Supreme Court has upheld a decision to refer the dispute on the dock workers and management over the termination of the son of the BIU leader to a tribunal. So the court has ruled that this matter should have been to a tribunal. Stevedoring Services had called for a judicial review of the labor minister's decision to refer the matter to a tribunal, arguing that disagreements over the 2020 termination of Chris Furbert Jr. did not amount to a labor dispute. I think if you got a chance, and the World Gazette has read it, the other reporters, you might want to go and get a copy of or see the ruling, the court ruling. And it's clear, particularly as it relates to what the World Gazette reported, reported that the court heard conflict arose over disagreement between Mr. Furbert, the son of the Chris Furbert Sr., president of BIU Jr., and another employee, and I won't name the other employee. This matter was not over those two individuals. This incident with these two happened off the job. It happened off the job. The incident between Chris Furbert Jr. and Mr. Jones happened in the workplace or in Mr. Jones's office on Front Street, and that matter was referred as a police complaint to DPP. You would notice that the article says that the police complaint was made. Warren Jones, let me back up, Warren Jones Stevedoring Services said in court that on the day of the 6th, Mr. Furbert was terminated for gross misconduct after he attended the docks in breach of his suspension and threatened him. That's basically what his criminal complaint was when he filed. A police complaint was made about the allegation of threat, but the Department of Public Prosecutions determined that no offense had been committed and no charges were brought. Stevedoring Services argued in the Supreme Court that the Minister of Labor, the Honorable Jason Hibbert, had failed to give reasons to support the claim that it was a labor dispute. Mr. Jeffrey Elkson said, it is quite clear that there was and remains a situation of a dispute between the worker and the union on his behalf, wholly and partially relating to the termination of the worker. So it's very concerning when we continue to hear that this suspension of overtime was about an employee, when it's clearly the issue where the employer has got the Minister of Labor in court saying you had no right to refer this matter to arbitration. And I think the reason why they pointed out, I think they mentioned something about, I think they make mention of the, right here. The firm suggested that the claim of a labor dispute came only after time Mr. Furbert had to file his claim under the Employment Act had run out. The BIU and Stevedoring Services had a collective bargaining agreement for over 50 years. We do not come under the Employment Act 2000. We have a collective bargaining agreement that governs our relationship between the employer, SSL, and the BIU. So for the firm to even make that assertion that under the Employment Act, you are out of time. Totally, that was the case. And I think if you look at the ruling, there was probably 107 paragraphs in total. It might be a little bit off, but I think page number, whatever page number it is, and the final ruling of the judge, it was that this matter, he can't make a decision whether the employee was wrong or the employee was right. All he knows is this matter should have been referred to a tribunal. And that's what the judge's ruling was. So I will give you a copy, like I said, of the email that was sent to Mr. Jones about why the suspension of overtime is getting in place. So for them to say it was a demand and it was because of the employee, that's not what the ban says. It didn't say that. You want to add anything?
No, you covered it.
Cool. Any questions?
Where does this case lie now? When is the tribunal?
Great question. Great question. So it would appear that from the BIU's point of view, because we felt the employee shouldn't have been fired, the minister felt that the matter should be referred to a tribunal. The judge in the Supreme Court ruled that, I think I read the first sentence, I'll just read it again. The Supreme Court has upheld a decision to refer a dispute between the dock workers and management over the termination of the son of the union leader to a tribunal. Stevedoring Services now appealing the judge's decision because they're saying the judge erred in law, so they're now going to the appeals court, which probably will happen in June or July this year, because they don't believe that the judge got it right.
So,
Sure.
can you confirm, you said you've got the email alerting Stevedoring Services to the, you're going to share the email alerting Stevedoring Services to the upcoming overtime ban, but the letter that the board received on January 18th, you said, are you sharing that with us as well?
You will get a copy of that letter and was sent to two members of the board, and it's backed up. One person's on the first side and the other person's on the second side.
And you're saying that it requests a discussion about those three points?
Absolutely correct. We would like to discuss with the Polaris board these points. Discuss. You can turn it into a demand, try to turn it into a demand if you like. Look, I don't want to discuss point one. I don't want to discuss point two. I'll discuss point three with you. They chose, the board sent a letter. Why not discuss none of them points with you? None of them. Not one of them.
Then after not being willing to discuss it because they're saying, don't deal with the board, deal with the CEO, deal with Warren Jones,
Yeah.
then BIU or the dock workers chose, now we're going to institute an overtime ban because you're not willing to discuss with us?
I think that the overtime ban was instituted, if this is dated the 18th, which is 18th of January.
Yes.
So the timing of the overtime ban, I think I read it to you. This email that was sent to Mr. Jones is sent on Tuesday, the 14th of February. We got a response back from the Polaris board on the 6th of February. So a week, 8 days after we got the letter from Polaris board, this was sent to Mr. Jones.
And are you saying
writing.
that's in response to them not
That's
saying?
in response. That's
Yes,
in
so-
response to that. That's correct.
So whether it's discussing that we're demanding or whatever, you're still saying if we don't get what we want, which is a discussion, we're going to have an overtime ban. Isn't that essentially what's...
Yeah, but the discussion was around the ban. The ban was about the situation between the minister and them.
But it's still an overtime ban. And isn't it the case that, so my understanding was that the ban was supposed to be put in place and carry on until the matter was settled, but then it seems that the workers at the docks didn't agree with that.
I just said that to you just now, sir.
Yeah.
I try to make sure that I clarified our position was that we had a first meeting,
Yeah,
clear majority of members were present, they decided to implement a ban. There were members who decided, well, we don't think that's correct, so we had another meeting, like the union would do, democratic process. We had 19, just to be transparent, we had 19 members out of 35 present at that first meeting, clear majority. We only need about 15 members to have a quorum when we're having a meeting. We had 19 present. So we'll pass in the first meeting.
how many?
And the second meeting, we had 32, 33 at the second meeting. And that meeting was held here. First one was held in Georgia during working hours.
So the first,
Listen to that.
Yeah.
First meeting held during working hours, 19 persons present. Second meeting held lunch hour last week, Monday, and we had 32 people present.
and so when you had the majority present, it showed that most of the workers did not want to have an overtime.
Yes, sir. That's what it stated. I said that. And based on that, they reversed the decision from the first meeting.
Okay, and we are hearing today that some dock workers are pushing for decertification of stevedoring services. Can you comment?
I can't comment on that. And let's just be clear, right? Because whilst the union understands the process of decertification, and I'm not denying that there might be, workers down there who are not satisfied with some of the things that are going on that they ask for decertification. All I would ask them workers to is even consider that. Think about the value of that organization or what the doc has meant to this organization going back way back from 1959 all the way forward. So if you're not upset about this, upset about the current general president, or you're upset about something else, decertification, is that the correct way to go? If that is basically what you're saying some workers are contemplating? Look, all I can tell you, sir, is that my members have an opinion. They have an opinion about the president of the BIU. He shouldn't be here any longer. He should go. So because a minority of workers are saying that I should go, I should leave, there are people who didn't want President Clinton to be president of the United States, but he remained there. The people didn't want Barack Obama to be president of the United States, but he remained there. The clear majority wanted him to stay. So if there is, it's news to me where you're saying that there is an effort to decertify the union.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
The pushback coming from Stephen Lawrence,
Mm.
think is because it's your son? Or why is this situation completely separate from
Well,
yourself?
Well, if you think about it, right, you know, if you look at this being one individual, most times the union has an issue with an employer, it's about one individual. I'll give you an example. I won't quote the manager's name, but I'm just to say we had a manager from Stephen Service fired. Mr. James terminated his employment. He actually went got another job for another employer. He was able to working with the other employer for about 2 to 3 months. And the workers instituted an overtime ban because the union had asked Mr. James to give this person a job because there was a job vacant in another area. Whilst he was in his manager position, just to move him down here. Mr. James made it crystal clear to the union, I am not giving him a job. He said this during mediation, because we had mediation, all debate mediation, told the mediator, I am not backing down, I'm not giving that person a job. Only after the workers instituted an overtime ban, that worker today is not working back at Stephen Services.
How far do you think this dispute is going to go?
Oh, I guess I can't speak to that. All I can tell you is that if Stephen Services saying we're going to the appeals court, if the appeals court turns them on, then where they going over there to the privy council? Yeah, they ask them that. I don't know. I have no idea.
So what happens with Chris Jr. moving forward?
Well, of course, he remains terminated, just like we've had, because this question was asked of me, you know, if this wasn't your son, would be here 3 years on the road? I gave the example. We had 3 workers from the corporation album, 3. 2 of them were out of probably 3 years old. That case was 3 years old. One of them was 2 years and 6 months. The both that were 3 years old, we got the arbitration ruled in our favor that they shouldn't have been fired. Second one, third one, we won that one too. He got his job back. The first, I think the other 2 that didn't get the job back, the arbitrator says, well, I couldn't force the employer to hold a position of them for him, but even though I couldn't do that, the fund, what they was fired for was wrong. Those 2 cases were over, like I said, 3 cases of them was 2, 3 years old, one of them 2 years and 6 months.
Just to set the record straight for the naysayers, if
Yeah.
this was someone else's child, you'll be fighting just the same way.
Well, if you look at my history, I think my history speaks for itself.
Yes, sir.
Maybe it's for somebody, first of all, if an injustice taking place. Remember, the reason why I think I'm the president of BIU, I worked on the docks for 24 years. I was the organizer for at least another 20 years after that. So when it comes to knowledge about the docks or whatever have you, even if, you know, well, right now, Brother Arnold's the organizer, when he has a problem with something, he comes to me and asks me to get clarification. Why? The conditions that the 24 years I worked on the docks, 15 years as president of the Dock Work Division, and then once I came to work for the BIU in 1995, I became the divisional organizer. So I have a lot of experience as it relates to what happens on the docks.
So, do you know why the workers appear to have a change of heart or change of mind from the first vote to the second vote?
Well, I can say that I think that, you know, they're looking at it from the perspective that, you know, does this really impact them per se? Because if this is a situation where, you know, they are appealing the decision from the judge because this is a case where the employer applied for judicial review. The affected party was the minister. Another affected party was the BIU and by extension our member. So understanding, I think, you know where that goes. I think that we do understand our process. I do appreciate that sometimes it may not always work on our field, but those things happen. They happen. and it's just a matter of for us to look at what has transpired, understanding that I think once the workers took the decision, I think maybe, the first reason why they took the decision, they felt it was impacted them, and I guess maybe after the second meeting some of them felt because if you had, clear majority in the first one and you convinced 3 others or 4 others to come with me to change our decision because, the question was asked, me straight, how does it affect us? Well, through a negotiation process. Because when Mr. Jones came at stevedoring service, we had a conversation with the negotiating team that I was the chairman of the negotiating team about profit sharing. Profit sharing means the company makes a profit, you get this. Plus you get, whether it's a rate of inflation increase, and on top of that, we'll be profit sharing. So right now, if you got legal costs is going to the roof now, and my profit sharing is going down, that means I'm being impacted. At least what you've given me for the past several years as profit sharing, now it's taking a dip. So indirectly, it is impacting them. No, maybe you might want to go back and counter the profit sharing arrangement you've got. Let's get rid of that. But certainly that's in front of some of the members on it, and that's probably one of the concerns that they have.
Just asking, why is it that you would not wait until this case goes to the appeal and goes through its appeal around June, July? Because that could essentially vindicate the BIU's position anyway and instruct stevedoring services to take it to industrial tribunal. Why not wait for that?
Well, I think you should appreciate that at any point in time, if a matter is a month old, a year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, the union will be willing to reach out to that employer to see whether or not you're prepared to resolve this matter. Always. We've always done that. And that's not going to change. So while they say we should wait to this, wait for that, well, I would have thought, just being respectful, you file a criminal complaint. Sorry, but this is not a criminal complaint. We can put that over here. Let me leave it. It's not a criminal complaint. You go for judicial review, and the judge rules on every point you thought you were making in the judicial review, and you're still saying, well, guess what? I'm going all the way. So now, as I said earlier, you have 3 parties telling you that you got this all wrong, but you're saying, I'm going to continue to go. I'm going to continue to go that way. Fine. The workers at some point in time have a right to say, you know what? We want to question, the board. We want to question since Mr. Jones answers to the board, and the board says, well, go back to Mr. Jones. Okay, fine. We understood getting back to Mr. Jones. But Mr. Jones made a decision to terminate the employee. He's not going to reinstate him. He says not back and on. He said that many, many times before. I mean, there are so many things that could be said that will come out during the arbitration process that I'm not at liberty to say at this point in time, but I can tell you that it's very concerning that the board is aware of these statements. They're aware of them. And for this to come out during the arbitration process, all the years that I've been in arbitration, I have never seen such glaring support of someone who was treated unjust. I'm telling you that. And it's not because of my son. I'm telling you, just looking at the facts of the case, looking at the facts, and that's what they are. Written documentation, not he said, she said, written documentation in writing. Anything else?
And the question is, while yes, this has gone on a long time, and that's a legitimate question of why, but it's still that from not being willing to have a discussion went to we want to institute an overtime ban. Does that seem an extreme reaction?
So when I gave you the example of the manager who got fired, and Mr. Jones took his decision then, you can do what you like. I'm not backing down. I tell you, we went all the way to a third party, mediation. And he said to the media, I'm sorry, but that's my position, and I'm not backing down. I just gave you the example. The employee was a manager. He wasn't even one of my members. Well, he was a former member, and then he moved up into the ranks. So he worked on the docks for 20 plus years, moved up into the ranks of management. After 2 years or so, things weren't working out, so he got fired. So the members are saying, like, okay, well, we understand, Mr. Jones, he can work out in your management team. Why don't you just give him a job over here since we got a couple Vegas? No, we're not doing that. And the reason why they didn't do that, because they had done it 2 other times before. They had done it 2 other times before, you know. So it's not like they hadn't done it. 2 other managers done it, fired them, but they demoted them. Told us he's not doing that anymore. That was his decision. I'm not doing it anymore, and that's why he said, I'm not backing down this time. That's why he made that statement. But in the end, he backed down. Why? Because the Workers Institute overtime ban. It lasts for maybe a week to 2 weeks, and we came back to the table, and he gave the brother a job, who's still working at Stevedores today. That was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.